For Inside Carolina, I'm Taylor Vippolis, and this is Up in the Rafters, where I'm joined by Carolina basketball legend and 2017 national champion Justin Jackson. Justin, Carolina plays against NC State. They win 80-69. They go on the road to the Carrier Dome. They beat Syracuse 72-68. Don't look now. Carolina has won 10 of their last 12 games. With a focus on these two games in particular, what have been your biggest takeaways watching this Carolina team?
Um, I think for one, which is kind of my biggest, is just kind of the steadiness of RJ once again. Obviously, NC State, he had a big output as far as scoring wise goes, but just kind of being that rock in the when things kind of get going crazy, kind of being the steadiness of this North Carolina team. I think also having Pete back more, kind of in rhythm and playing his normal minutes, I think is big. I love seeing him being the initiator at the top of the key, whether it's going and setting screens or dribble handoffs or whatever it might be. I think brings a totally different dynamic, as opposed to having to have Armando being up top, being kind of that initiator, and him not being able to be down low and just dominate. So I think him being back is big for them. And then obviously Mondo just being Mondo, him kind of taking care of that inside, and letting everybody else kind of take care of the outside, I think is big for them. So it was good to see them, for one, beat NC State, and then two, kind of, fight out that Syracuse game, whether it was them making mistakes or whatever, them fighting through the adversity and kind of pulling that one out was, I think, was going to be big for them going forward.
Yeah, the Syracuse game felt like a game early in the season that they would have lost, where you have such an emotional NC State game and a physical game against NC State, or even a game last year early on where the team has a big game and then you're like, let's see how they respond, and they don't respond really that well. But I think this is a sign of growth from this team that they handled the NC State game. They can go on the road to Syracuse and still execute their game plan, especially down the stretch. You mentioned Mondo being Mondo in the NC State game. He sets a couple of all-time UNC records. He sets the rebounding record over Hansbrough, and he sets the double-double all-time record over Billy Cunningham. What's kind of your takes when you're watching Armando Bacot and seeing some of the numbers that he's putting up and passing some of the names that he is passing as he keeps climbing up some of these all-time lists, and now he's at the top of a few of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's for one, it's kind of crazy because I feel like we kind of get bored seeing the same thing over and over again. Like we're so used to seeing Mondo put up 15 and 15, right? Like we're so used to him just doing that every single night that it's kind of like it's just normal at this point. But once you start kind of seeing him breaking records and kind of being the all-time leader in rebounds and double doubles, and it really puts into perspective the amount of work that he has put in since being at North Carolina. I think the coolest thing is you've seen him get better each and every year, in kind of a few different aspects. And so I think that's the coolest part, is just kind of seeing, okay, he's been doing this for a while, but seeing him still try to improve in certain areas, I think is kind of the coolest part to me.
Yeah, and one thing you'll learn in the media business is when somebody gives a take, somebody else has to jump out in front with an even crazier take. So I've been saying that, and you have been saying it too, but Armando, he needs more credit. We're kind of normalizing this. UNC six-man B-Dot takes it one step further, and he says Armando Bacot is a top 5 heel of all time. You look at the list of all the UNC basketball players, you look at the names that are up in the rafters. Mondo, top 5. I'm going with reach. Where do you kind of land in that?
Hey, look, I love Mondo, and Mondo has freaking put his stamp at North Carolina. He really has. But there's a lot of great players that have come through North Carolina. Like top 5, that's a stretch. Now, if they make it back to the championship and they win it this year, then he's got to be in the conversation as far as one of the best players to come through UNC. Has to be. But I think it's tough because even I've played with guys, even Marcus was in my eyes one of the best guys at UNC, and it's hard to freaking put him in top 10, top 5, right? Like just because of the names. I mean, we're talking MJ, Jameson, like Sean, like we're talking like big, huge household names in North Carolina. So, but at the same time, Mondo has he's put his stamp at UNC basketball for pretty much ever. So the credit needs to be given to him from the standpoint of the work that he's put in, the time that he's put in, and the numbers that he's put up while he's been there.
I think it's for Carolina basketball, if your name is even in the like top 50 conversation, that's a massive win.
That's a huge, huge accomplishment and a huge honor. So he shouldn't even take people saying that he's not top 5 as disrespect. Like he should take the fact that we're still talking about him being one of the best to go to North Carolina as a sign of respect. But like I said, you can't take anything away from Mondo. He's been a monster. And he just kind of keeps doing it night in and night out.
And I mentioned it earlier, but Carolina has won 10 of their last 12. It looks like a more consistent product that you're getting from the Tar Heels on a night in and night out basis. What have you kind of seen that's led to more success and more consistent results?
I think it's kind of being that two-headed monster right now, as far as RJ and Mondo. I like just from a scheme standpoint, offensively, I'm liking how they're setting a whole lot more high ball screens for RJ and even Caleb at times, to kind of get them in free space, kind of let them go and make a play downhill. And I think that's causing more space to be available for Mondo to kind of clear people out for rebounds or even, get deep post position. You kind of saw a few times in the NC State game, he would set it and roll and immediately seal. And then he would have space to go to work. So I think that's kind of the biggest thing that I'm seeing kind of game in and game out, like just giving those guards space to kind of make plays, which then also gives Mondo space when he gets down low. So I think the consistency of kind of running that kind of offense and getting those guys involved in that way, I think is what's been key for them.
In the NC State game, the Wolfpack, they try to win it with physicality. Carolina matched them. What would you say the keys are to win a game when a team is trying to be physical with you?
I mean, you want to try not to change your game plan too much for other teams, right? So you want to try to play the same way that you've played the whole time. But when a team is very physical, mainly in the half court, for one, you want to try to get out and transition more. And then like they were doing against NC State, just setting those high ball screens and getting guys into space away from people's bodies. When you start trying to, be physical back to a guy that's trying to just be more physical than you, sometimes that doesn't work out. But when you kind of use space to get actions going or to kind of get downhill and start using your speed against that, I think that's whenever you have success. And I think that's kind of what you saw against NC State. Was just Pete was setting the freaking high ball screen up by the logo, and RJ or Caleb were just coming off that and just making a play off of that. So I think that's, you kind of have to, use your speed and kind of your smarts against guys that are just going to try to be more physical than you.
One of the talking points from opposing coaches and opposing fan bases, I don't know if you've seen on Twitter, but has been the calls that North Carolina gets, and they're shooting a ton of free throws. I looked at the numbers. Carolina has attempted 521 free throws. It's over 100 free throws more than second place. When you're watching the NC State game, I don't think it was Carolina getting like favorable calls. I think it was just kind of their game plan to attack NC State. NC State has fouled the most in the ACC. Carolina has drawn the most fouls. So put those two together, you're going to be shooting a lot of free throws. Why is Carolina so effective at getting to the free throw line when you look at the gap between first and second, even just in the ACC.
Yeah, I mean the biggest part for that is Mondo down low. When you are going for every offensive rebound and you're posting and stealing almost every single play, you're going to just draw fouls by people trying to get in front of you or trying to box you out or those type of things. So I think Mondo has to get the credit on kind of imposing his will on the inside and causing those people to foul. But then too, I mean, in college, it's tough when guys get into space, right? Like you when you set a high ball screen on a guy like RJ and he's coming downhill against a big that maybe isn't used to sliding his feet side to side or guarding a quick guard, you cause issues for those bigs that are guarding. So then you start trying to do different schemes to try to stop that, and guys are in positions where they're not used to being. And I think just causing those kind of advantages allow them to be able to draw fouls. And obviously, to North Carolina's credit, they've been aggressive as well, going to the rim and then trying to get the contact. So I think a big part has to go to Mondo, but then just kind of the offense and the way they've been running it, I think, is kind of causing issues for the other teams.
And not only is Carolina shooting free throws at a really high percentage, they're making the free throws too. I believe they're first in the ACC in free throws drawn, and then sixth in free throws made percentage wise. What does that do for a team when you can get that many points at the free throw line? They were 14 of 23 against Cuse, and then you almost have to, squint your eyes to really believe this NC State number. They were 36 of 39 against NC State.
Yeah, I mean, that's, for one, the number of free throws that they shot being 39 is absolutely insane in a college basketball game. I mean, you had two guys shoot double figures free throws, and then another one shoots 7. So I think part of that, obviously, the referees were a little whistle happy at times, probably. But at the same time, they stepped up and knocked them down. I mean, 14 for 14, 5 for 6, 7 for 7, 9 for 10. Like, guys stepped up and hit the free throws when they needed to. So, all the credit goes to them and being aggressive and trying to, draw the contact, get to the rim, try and get to the offensive glass. So, hopefully they can keep doing that.
In the Syracuse game, Gerard hit a 3 to put Cuse up. The score was 68-66 with 1:23 left. This UNC team, they don't flinch. They go on a 6-0 run to close out the game. They kind of have that, like, we've been here before mentality. How much does it help that this UNC team is an experienced, older one where it's hard to put them in situations that they haven't been in before?
I think it's very important when it comes to, if you look at the whole situation in Syracuse. For one, you're playing in a football stadium. Like, you can't get used to that, honestly, whether you do 16 shoot arounds or, whatever. You can't really get used to that as far as shooting, the depth perception, all that kind of thing. So you take that into account. You take the fact that Syracuse played a really good game, especially down the stretch. Like, they made some plays, that ended up, thankfully North Carolina was able to pull it out. But, it was a tough game that North Carolina had to fight through certain adversities. And like you said, when he hit that and they go up a minute and a half and they come right back with a 6-0 run, that's just growth from the start of the season, right? And those are the type of things that going forward into the tournaments and hopefully making the run back to the championship, you have to have those moments that you can remember and go back to in your mind. Okay, we've been here before. Like, we've been down 4 points with 3 minutes left. Like, we know exactly what it takes to come back from this. So I think, that kind of game and being able to pull that out and have that kind of opportunity, I think is going to help them going forward.
One of Hubert Davis's points of emphasis has been getting Pete Nance more aggressive on the offensive end. You mentioned it earlier in the podcast where Carolina's running a few more things for Pete Nance, specifically against Cuse. He was 6 of 17. Not the best percentage, but he does score 21 points, and you kind of see some of that aggressiveness that Coach Davis was talking about. He plays all 40 minutes, kind of that Iron Five type approach. But the question I wanted to ask for you is related to the 40 minutes. Hubert Davis in his post-game press conference was basically saying, like, at the end of the game, you just can't be tired. So from a playing perspective, when you're playing that much, what's kind of going through your head, or is it just kind of like adrenaline that's getting you over the hump when maybe you're any other time you would need a sub?
I think this far into the season, by the time it gets probably to midway through the second half, I don't think you really even notice how long you've been on the court. But at the same time, 40 minutes is 40 minutes. Like that's playing a whole game. Like that's tough to do. So I mean, if Coach Davis, if that's how he says their approach needs to be, like they can't be tired at the end of games, then I guess they just have to get their mind right and maybe do a little extra conditioning at times. But I mean, I think Pete is extremely important. He kind of goes, for me, he kind of goes with RJ as far as being kind of that even kill type guy for this team at times, right? Like I remember watching towards the end of the game, I can't remember the exact time, but Syracuse was kind of making a run. And Pete came down, and I think he had like a spin to a left-hand finish. And it kind of like settled everything, right? And from then on, it was a battle, but North Carolina was able to kind of, okay, like we're good. Like now we can come back and try to get a stop and then, keep this thing going. But I think for him, just being out there and being kind of that, that steady force as well, I think that's going to be big for them.
And Carolina does not have a game until next Saturday when they play Duke. But in the meantime, how do you handle the long layoffs as a player where, Carolina plays Syracuse earlier in the week and now they're not playing for a full 10, 11 days and then the game that you are coming back for is a game with the magnitude of a Duke game?
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of a weird time of the schedule. Like you kind of get used to, whether you're playing 40 minutes or not, like you get used to playing like every other 3 days or whatever the schedule might be for a while. And then all of a sudden taking a week off, like you really have to be intentional on, okay, obviously Coach Davis is going to have a practicing, but as an individual, you have to really be focused on, okay, maybe I need to get some extra work to kind of supplement maybe what I would have done in a game or whatever it might be. Because then, like you said, you come right out of that and you've got, a huge game coming out of it. So, obviously Coach Davis will keep him sharp. He's been through it as a player and obviously as a coach multiple times. So he knows what you got to do to make sure to stay sharp. But, it is a weird dynamic, going from playing every other day almost to, okay, now we've got a week off until our next game. What do we do?
That is all we have for this week. We will be back next week before the Duke game to talk more about Carolina basketball. We won't have games to talk about, so we'll have to figure something else in the meantime. But thank you to everybody who's watched or listened. And Justin, as always, appreciate the time.
Always, man.